Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Council on Tuesday, January 28th. Hatsqualawan, please still Squamish, Owayameo. We are meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. One item on our agenda today, motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Herford, second by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we have a landfill operations and maintenance contract award. Turn it over to our staff. Before I do that, I'm going to Councillor Race.
Thank you, and I'm going to declare a conflict in this. The manager now for GFL in this area between Squamish and Pemberton is now my campaign manager for the last 3 elections. And prior to the last election, she was kind of in middle management, but as a result of some organizational changes that have happened at GFL over the last year, she now finds herself in the top spot, and I congratulate her for that. But I think in that circumstance, because this is a district contract and that is very much involves her position, this is a reasonable apprehension of bias, and so I will recuse myself from this discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Over to you, Ms. White.
Great. Good afternoon. My name, for those that are tuning in, is Shannon White. I'm a sustainability coordinator at the District of Squamish, and I'm here with Chris Wickham, the Director of Engineering, to present the Landfill Operations and Maintenance Contract Award. So just for a bit of background, for those who have not been or had the privilege of being at the landfill,
that is a Squamish.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of overview because I will, in the report to council and in this presentation, we do reference a few different areas in the landfill, and I just wanted to give an overview. So at the top of this image is the GFL private operation. So it's called the Chikai Recycling Yard. That has nothing to do with the District of Squamish. It is run by GFL and their customers, and it is their operations. This contract that we're here to talk about does not touch that property. It is purely about the landfill and the transfer station in the southern part of the photo. In the landfill, which is kind of the oval shape in the middle, we have the closed section, which does not accept garbage and is engineered closed and has some passive landfill gas piping on it. As well as to south of that, we have the active landfill where we take garbage on a regular basis. In 2019, this is we're still working on the numbers, but we accepted about 12,000 metric tons of garbage. And then in the south portion is the area that public can access, which we call the transfer station. And in there is a multitude of different recycling options, including a place for residents who bring garbage to the site to get rid of. So there we take things like large appliances, styrofoam, drywall, etc. So the contract that we're here to discuss is really for managing the active portion of the landfill and the transfer station, just to be clear. A little bit of additional background on the landfill. So it is a key part of the solid waste management system for the District of Squamish. So it accepts all of the District of Squamish's garbage, as well as that from several portions within the SLRD, such as Furry Creek and Britannia, and then also Squamish Nation. So it is on track, as has been presented to council before, to be full around 2027. This number is dependent on compaction and the ability of our community to divert recyclable materials, such as wood waste, away from the landfill. The Squamish landfill does have a unique development plan, largely due to the large wall that we have been building and is now complete around the southern end of it, that really requires the operator or the contractor in this spot to have best landfilling practices and the right equipment for it. So we don't have tons and tons of acres like some sites. We really need to ensure that on our site in the southern area of the landfill, the best landfilling techniques are being put into practice. Just a little bit of overview of the RFP process. So the RFP was developed by the engineering department as well as in collaboration with the procurement manager. It was as per the District of Squamish's purchasing policy. The RFP was available and advertised province-wide on sites such as BC Bid, through the Squamish Chief, and our website, squamish.ca. Just really trying to get interest and get the best value. We did have 3 companies attend the pre-bid meeting on site to go over the site and the requirements within the RFP, and we received 1 proposal in the end. Staff went through the proposal. There was a team put together from different departments. The proposal was deemed compliant and met our expectations, and there was a period of negotiation and a lot of additional questions on the initial proposal. I am not going to go through this full list, but this is the scope of work, or a piece of the scope of work. The full scope of work is in the report to council. But overall, the main pieces are this contract is for operating and maintaining the entire site of the landfill. So this is the landfill and the transfer station, compacting, covering garbage with best landfill practices, as I mentioned. And then a key piece is also managing the recyclable materials that we take at the site. Because our site is so small, we don't have storage space. So for example, as wood is received, we need to bring it needs to be brought to a pre-approved destination, whereas drywall is received, they all go to different locations. And we, District of Squamish staff, work with the contractor to have those sites pre-approved. So the contractor can't just take it to another landfill, for example. The wood, we have to we work with them. As well as there's trained site personnel, equipment, bins, and materials like that. There are several new elements I just wanted to highlight that are different from the previous contract. And I didn't mention, but the previous contract was a 5-year contract, so it's 2015 to 2019, and it does expire February 1st, 2020. So the new contract does have a few elements that we've added. A lot of it is really to tighten up areas that were unclear. There was a bit of uncertainty in the previous contract. Also to elevate the expectations that the District of Squamish has for the operator on the site. As I mentioned, we have a limited lifespan, which we would love to see expanded, and we can do that through compaction, equipment, trained staff, and then diversion. So some of the key elements that are in the contract, the new contract, are elements such as now we are requiring explicitly that the contractor is the prime contractor, so which means they are responsible for the safety of all the contractors on the site. And whereas before this was a little bit unclear, now it is very explicit. There's increased expectations around equipment. The new contract, the new contractor or the proposed proponent has proposed equipment, new equipment that is set to meet the highest emission standards there are. They also have anti-idling policies, as well as reducing overuse or like misuse of equipment, so that we're reducing the amount of diesel burned. We have also included, which is new to this contract, liquidated damages, which is essentially penalties. Well, we can't call them penalties, but the liquidated damages and a bonus that is really if we've set the compaction rate that we want, so which means how much they, how do you explain compaction rate? How heavy they pack the garbage down, essentially with the equipment, and ensuring that they're running the machine the proper amount of times over garbage. And we've set the requirement within the contract, and if they don't meet the requirement, like the best use, we have these liquidated damages that then they pay us back, as well as, for example, the overuse of cover, so that they don't put too much cover, because we want to save that airspace. So we've put in a whole bunch of different levels of liquidated damages. We also have a lot of requirements around training, not only for the site superintendent, but the actual operators who are driving the equipment, which the current operators do not have the landfill training, as well as maintenance and monitoring of the electric fence. Additionally, the proponent has proposed an offset fund, because the district did tell us how you can incorporate sustainability into your proposal. And the offset fund is where they put aside 2 cents per liter of diesel used to purchase carbon offsets or go into sustainability initiatives. We don't have a lot of details around that yet because we haven't worked that out exactly with them, but that's exciting. And then also there are increased expectations around reporting and tracking, which is really linked to the requirements of the Ministry of Environment. And so that's a lot of the new elements, which are exciting for managing the site. So an overview of the contract that we are looking to award. It is a 5-year contract with the option of 2 2-year extensions. They are in favor of the District of Squamish, those extensions, and it's also up till the landfill closes, just in case there's anything that happens. The financial implications, as you can see outlined in this table, is really the annual day-to-day operation and maintenance line item, which is the personnel and the equipment, did come in higher than what we had budgeted, in 2020. However, the material management piece, which is essentially what we pay to recycle all of those elements. So how much we pay for drywall, how much we pay for wood, how much we pay for mattresses, for example. In the end, there's only we've over budgeted by around $100,000, which does give the District of Squamish a small buffer for that material management piece. And I just want to highlight the annual day-to-day operations and maintenance is a regular payment that the District of Squamish pays, but the material management line item is something that fluctuates and is highly dependent on the markets, the recycling cost. For example, the District of Squamish's mattress recycler burnt down, had a fire a couple of years ago, and then now we send all our mattresses to the Mission Hope area, and there's an increased cost. So things like that are out of our control, but we still, in favoring diversion over landfilling, we have been just taking that cost. So that's that line item, and we don't have, a lot of it is out of our control on that piece. So the one proposal the District of Squamish received was from Green for Life, which is formerly Carney's, as many people in the community know. So since the acquisition of Carney's by Green for Life is a nationwide, actually US and Canada-wide company now. They provide collection, processing, transfer stations, all sorts of different services in the solid waste industry. They serve many municipalities. They also have industrial, commercial, construction, institutional customers, and they have an extensive network of landfills. So within Western Canada, they have 18 landfills, and then they have significantly more in kind of central and eastern Canada as well. And they do have a depth of experience in landfill operation, management, safety, and efficiency. And staff can attest that since the transition, we have met several of their staff from the head office of Green for Life, or at least kind of not the Sea to Sky corridor, who have come on site and provided suggestions and recommendations on improvements for our operations under the current previous contract. So that being said, there are two resolutions. One is that the District of Squamish award the contract for landfill operations maintenance to Green for Life Environmental, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the contract or execute the agreement. We do have an alternative resolution if council directs some sort of element for staff to go back and renegotiate. I'm happy to take questions.
Councilor French, then Councilor Anderson, then Councilor Hurford.
Thank you. I have a question about the wording of the motion. It says to execute the contract or execute the agreement. I don't understand this. What's the difference between contract agreement?
Is there two different documents or one?
There's only one document.
Are we going to call it the contract or the agreement?
We'll call it the contract.
Okay,
It's a great question.
so we'll amend the motion when it comes up.
Also, I'd like to know who's responsible for labeling and signage in a public area? And I ask because I find it confusing and inconsistent. Is that us? Is that the contractor?
Through the mayor, I agree, it is incredibly confusing. So, and that's one of those gray areas under the previous contract. The district of Squamish did some, the contractor did some, the coloring wasn't coordinated. So this time in the current the proposed contract, we're ironing that out so that it's really under the responsibility of one person, either us, one party I should say, us or the contractor. So we're just working on that piece. And that being said, is that we are working with GFL, and this is kind of tapping into their depth of knowledge and experience. They're providing a lot of recommendations on clarifying the signage on site to make it easier for those folks who just are, 1-2 time users.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson?
Of course, it's always advantageous to have competing bids. We did receive only the one bid from GFL, although you've mentioned that 3 companies attended the pre-bid site tour. My question is, has staff done an evaluation of this circumstance? For example, maybe there's prospects to adjust the scope of work, because it should naturally be an important factor to encourage competing bids. Whether that has been evaluated, and maybe secondly, whether exit interviews might be entertained with the other bidders to get a feel for next time, or I just feel it should be an important consideration to make adjustments where we can, where reasonable, to ensure there's competition.
Through the mayor, I think it's an interesting point about scope. Actually, I don't think we could have adjusted this scope in this particular case. It's not necessarily highly specialized, or it hasn't been tuned in a way that only one company could. In fact, we were very careful to make sure that we didn't write the RFP in a way that there was an advantage to one or another group. The exit interviews are actually a standard practice for us in cases like this. I don't believe we've had a chance to do that yet because we're just pushing to get this contract in time. But yeah, we will absolutely reach out to other folks and see what we can learn. Thank you for that.
Through the mayor, just to add to that. So in the one way we built this RFP in hopes of kind of opening the competition was instead of saying something like you must have 10 years of landfilling experience, we said you have to have X number of heavy equipment experience, and you can hire a landfill consultant who do exist. So, for example, one of the companies that came to the pre-bid meeting was a construction company who was to pair with a landfill consultancy. So we tried to keep it as open as possible.
Thank you.
Councilor Herbert?
Thank you. Councilor Anderson's questions helped with my first bit, which was just understanding that lack of other bids. And then can you go back to the slide where you had the costing and this one. The day-to-day operation bit portion was higher than I think we all expected, and I appreciate the rationale. But I do have a question about the material management, we talk a lot about diversion rates, and we're having I think collectively we can agree we've had a hard time affecting that down as fast as we all would like. And I was just curious how optimistic that calculation was, given that even in the description it says that they fluctuate dramatically due to conditions. I get when something's on fire, that's one thing, but as far as market rates and diversion rates and stuff, I just want to understand that bit a little more before I'm totally comfortable with it.
Through the mayor. So the way that material management line item, so bin rental, pull that aside because essentially we need 40-yard bins or 30-yard bins, etc. That's a set rate. But the way the contract is built is essentially we projected the tonnage of how much drywall, for example, we would be accepting on our site based on previous trends in previous years. And so in the RFP, we said we expect to accept X number of drywall, for example. Give us the unit price per ton. So then that's how this calculation is built. So behind it, every single recyclable item has a cost per ton or per unit for the proponent to dispose or recycle. And then we kind of calculate that back by how much we expect to receive on the site. That being said, hypothetically, if someone decided to get rid of 2,000 fridges or mattresses, then I mean that's a crazy number, but like an unexpected amount, then that we have no control. We can't control that, but that's why this budget line is always a little bit difficult to project.
Well,
Okay, yeah, thank you, that helps. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't counting on a 20% better diversion rate to hit that number or something, but that calculation was realistic, and it sounds like it was. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Betancourt.
So I got a few different things. So I'll stick with these numbers initially. Just want to understand, I mean, my understanding was that for at least some of these materials, there is, there might be a transportation fee, but who's ever receiving them may pay, see them as a resource and may pay for some materials, I thought. So maybe that's a mistake, but assuming there's a revenue source or even a cost there that we would be charging for receiving these materials, and so there'd be an offsetting revenue line somewhere, or are we saying that we're actually subsidizing the acceptance and management of these materials when they come in?
So through the mayor, if I understand the full question, so you're correct, there is no revenue line. So the revenue for this is the tipping fee. And we do, there is a little bit of revenue for a few items. So for example, metal, there's whatever the market rate for metal is, small appliances and paint, which are very low volume items at the landfill. There is a small amount of revenue. In this contract, the proposed contract, those revenues will go to the contractor, which then they have built into their pricing. But that being said, we did consider it, staff considered it, but the amount of revenue versus wasn't significant to make an impact on the cost. So yeah, the District of Squamish does set the tipping fees at the landfill to ensure that they will cover this amount as well. So does that fully answer your question?
Yeah, so then we do, through tipping fees, have a revenue line somewhere that offsets this eventually, and there may be some back and forth year to year, but okay. And I think you said 2 cents a liter for diesel as sort of an attempt at dealing with emissions. I haven't bought diesel for a long time, or ever maybe, so I don't have a good sense of, is that a reasonable offset? Does it approximate, some of what we do in our own carbon marketplace? Did we consider, we expect, a 50 cent a liter offset, but if you use biodiesel, we won't charge that, or if you go to battery, or explore options to help them with some of the equipment. We've talked about sort of looking to support procurement of more emissions-friendly stuff, support and or demand is. I'm just wondering what we kind of looked at and how that 2 cents compares to other sort of emissions fees.
Great question. Mayor? I'll start and then you can fill in the gaps. So I also have not bought diesel recently, so I can't tell you how it compares to the emission standards. So perhaps someone else on the team can fill that in. But and again, the 2 cents is what they've proposed. We haven't fully dove into that piece of it right now. We've been working really on the operations side of it. But GFL has proposed that they've done the calculations, and based on historical activity, this 2 cents per liter could result in a carbon offset of 30% of the entire operational footprint. which is the information they presented us. I don't have that much more detail than that, but that is, it does sound like it is significant. Christine, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I don't think so. I don't think the price of diesel is germane to this. Rather, it's what is the footprint and what is being offset. So 30% is what they've offered at this point.
And sorry, just to follow up on your question about type of equipment. So we did build the RFP highlighting the importance of the best quality equipment and reduced emissions through the equipment because it is operating regularly 5 days a week on site or 7 days depending on the piece of equipment. And they are looking at replacing several other pieces and updating a couple others. And as I mentioned, the new pieces are all going to have high emission standards and really be kind of the best available. They are not looking at biofuel or electric or CNG, for example, at this point in time. I think, well, it's also, we have to consider that our landfill has a limited lifespan. So investing in electric charging stations, for example, on site is a large investment when right now we can only guarantee 7 years of operation.
Okay. It's 1 o'clock, so we need to wrap up.
One more?
I still have a question, so can this be quick?
Okay, I hope so.
No, it needs to be quick.
Been hearing concerns still about the rate of conversion, so I'm wondering, what are our performance expectations in terms of, when there's bottles put in the wrong bin in the wrong place, that someone on site is taking responsibility for separating them out and they're not just going into the landfill, that we're sort of dealing with that separate from compaction rates, but actually auditing and monitoring it and have clear expectations set.
Through the mayor, we have high expectations that are built in that deal with our mixed waste rate, and we're looking at how can we limit loads with large amounts of, or over 10% of recyclables from entering our garbage streams on site at the landfill. So we're doing that through working with the contractor, but also seeing if there's other means like cameras and other things that we can do that is kind of District of Squamish responsibility versus the contractor responsibility. That being said, there is requirements in the contract for the landfill attendants, so the folks working in the transfer station in particular, to watch out and do, kind of audit the loads. Unfortunately, if someone is dumping directly into the 40-yard bin due to safety concerns, no one can go into a bin and pull material out. That's just a safety, it's a work safety concern, but we are working on stopping and having the landfill attendants do kind of separation. That has to go there, that goes there.
But are we auditing their performance, the attendance performance?
We are, through the mayor, we have staff on site, and we, on an irregular basis, multiple times a week, we'll have staff on site, as well as any feedback from the public. If there's a paper trail audit type thing, it's more through visiting the site and seeing how the operation runs.
We do take photos of the mixed waste loads, and so that is one way that they're continually mixed waste that is a load that has over 10% recyclables in it. So there is that communication on how come that load got dumped, why didn't you stop it, et cetera, et cetera. But then we are in that piece also working with them to kind of how can we stop it from even entering the site, like just that operational piece about that kind of goes a little bit out of their scope and into our scope. Like I said, cameras or whatnot.
So the cost of the contract's gone up 19%, so maybe building off of Councillor French and Pat Neal's comments, so what's in it for me as a taxpayer? What am I going to see that's different? Or what is better? Because we're paying more for this contract, there's clearly some new requirements, but how does that translate down to me as an everyday citizen?
I'll say that there is an increased scope. They are doing a better job of extending the life of the landfill, for example, through better compaction, which will have a very direct impact on rates and in the millions of dollars to the taxpayers of Squamish. So that is a portion of the increase. A portion of the increase. We can't break down how much is that and how much is for example, over the last 5 years, the contract was only allowed to was increased at half the rate of inflation. So here's catch-up time now into 5 years to catch up the rest of the inflation. So I can't point to this 19%. This is what you're getting for it. And this is what 19%. We are
But
getting
more
an increase.
support when you show up as a resident, better signage, like how do we
Right.
make sure that we're
Yeah.
actually getting value for our residents out of this contract as well?
So just to go
Yeah.
on what Chris has mentioned, so to his point, there is significant value in extending the landfill lifespan.
Absolutely. I'm
It's
not
a
going to
visual
disagree
thing,
with you
that
on
is-
that.
Yeah, that is huge. One of the things that, for example, it wasn't highlighted in this slide, but to your point is that we have in the new contract is a requirement for example, a second landfill attendant to be there, not full-time, but during all the peak busy times, because sometimes one of the landfill attendants, for example, follows the truck into the landfill. They're there auditing a mixed waste, like to make sure it's not a mixed waste load, and then the transfer station is left empty because we only have one person doing that job right now. And so the contract requires that there's 2 people doing that, so hopefully there's better service. And then again, things like signage and all those things we wanted to. Now there's clear requirements with road grading into the landfill, which is very minor, but again, that's kind of that tightening up these areas of uncertainty where it was like, whose responsibility is it before?
And I know that, it's a tip of the hat to the offset with the 2 cents on the diesel. But if you look at our own zero waste pyramid, the first step is refuse. And so one of the first steps would be to refuse fossil fuel and use biodiesel. Like, we should also, when we think about GHGs, be thinking about refuse first and then figuring out where it goes from there. So that's one thing to contemplate. There is biodiesel out there. And if they're still buying heavy equipment, it would be interesting to see if they can use that rather than fossil fuels. All right, does someone want to put an amended motion forward that fixes the language there? Councilor French?
I move the motion.
To authorize and execute the contract,
Yes.
seconded by Councilor Anderson. Any discussion? Councilor Pengill?
I would be a lot more comfortable supporting this when we have a bit more clarity on the emissions plan and offsets and the oversight on diversion, performance expectations on diversion rates and who is responsible, even if it's partly us having that clearly articulated who is responsible to what degree. And I guess I don't have clarity on where that responsibility is and what our expectations can be.
Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councilor Pettengill opposes. Motion carries. Thank you. Motion to terminate. Moved by Councilor Stoner, seconded by Councilor Herford. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.